Seid ihr bereit für einen ganz tollen Nachmittag mit 2 ganz wundervollen Vorträgen jetzt? Erstmal Gopi Kallayil. Yes, okay, das klingt gut. Gopi Kallayil. Ich habe Gopi kennengelernt in Stockholm auf der ersten Wisdom-Konferenz bei einem gemeinsamen Abendessen, bevor dann die Wisdom-Konferenz anfing. Und wir haben uns ganz intensiv unterhalten über Meditation, über Bewusstsein, über Inner Knowing, über all diese Fähigkeiten, die in uns ruhen. Und ich habe einen sehr, sehr interessanten Menschen kennengelernt, der für sich ganz sicher einen Weg zur Weisheit gefunden hat, auch zur Intuition und zur Kreativität. Gopi Kallayil leitet eine große Meditationsgruppe. Er hat erzählt, er hat vor ein paar Jahren da mit 3, 4 Leuten angefangen, auf irgendeinem Hügel bei Google in San Francisco Mountain View zu meditieren. Und ich glaube, inzwischen sind es 300 oder 400 Leute oder mehr. Und ich würde mich jetzt freuen, Gopi, if you come on stage.
I don't have Wi-Fi. Yeah, okay.
I think he's there. Gopi, welcome.
Thank you.
You said something very important for you is, and your special advice to everybody is to be happy. And you say you want the happy humans, or are you the happy human?
Well, when people ask me, like, what do you do? I don't give them my job title. I simply say, I am a happy human, because that is my primary purpose in life. Mm-hmm. And that's what my name card says, the happy mm-hmm. human.
And if he is not only a happy human, he's a brand evangelist for Google, and he will tell us a lot about his work today, isn't it? So like that.
Thank you, Gabrielle.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, Wisdom Munich. Thank you. I want to start off by the simple assertion that Google is the result of one big, giant intuition. So let me explain to you what I mean by that. Right now, if you look at all the things that Google is doing, you'll say that's very obvious. No, it's the idea, and it seems like the most normal thing to do. But I want to take you back slightly, a few years back in history. I want you to think of the time September 1998. What were you doing in September 1998, if you can remember that far? And I want you to think at the time how you lived your life, how you operated in the world, how you found directions when you wanted to get somewhere. If you wanted to look up the information like the 100 biggest companies in the world, what would you have done in 1998? If you wanted directions from here to Berlin, if you were driving, how would you have got that information? At that time, what is that? You buy a map, right? Yeah. So we work. So in that sort of a setting, 2 guys come in and they have this vision that what the world needs, what all of us need, is to take all publicly available information, organize it, and make it available, and so easy that we could pull it up on a little device like this. There was no such device even in our hands. But that is a vision that we should be able to access that information, carry it in our pockets. That sort of a vision can only come out of this intuition they had. There's no logical way to have imagined it. Because back then, the company didn't even have the kind of capability it has today. This was the world headquarters. One second. This was the world headquarters of Google. This garage in Menlo Park is where the company started in 1998. So you have to imagine that sitting inside a car garage, they're imagining through intuition where things could be in the future. And if you had walked into that garage, this is what you would have found. Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the founders of Google, sitting in what is then the engineering center, the boardroom, the sales office, all built into one. And back then the company had one simple product, just a web page. All the company had was this little web page. It worked only in the English language. A few thousand people used it around the Palo Alto, Stanford University area. And it could do only one thing. And the one thing it could do was, if you typed in a word or phrase in English, in that little white box at the top, it would give you a list of blue links of websites that had the same word. That's all it could do. Very rudimentary by today's standards, but back then it was considered revolutionary. But they started off with this intuition and didn't even look very pretty, because Sergey Brin, the Google founder, designed this web page himself. In fact, to his defense, what he says is, well, Larry told me to do it. I didn't have HTML skills. This is the best I could come up with. But the man must have had intuition back then, because he wrote on that web page, index contains, under the white box if you see, he wrote, index contains approximately 25 million pages, soon to be much bigger. And his intuition must have told him where all of this could have headed. Again, I want you to imagine, put yourself in the shoes of those two guys sitting in the garage, thinking of where their imagination could have taken them. And that could have only come out of intuition. But thanks to that intuition, this little white box now is used every single month by human beings 150 billion times. That's a big number. What does it mean? It means roughly 75 times every human being on the planet, on the internet, goes to that white box or speaks to the white box through that phone and asks Google something. It's used in 120 languages in 200 countries and territories. That's how far things have come since then. And now, that intuition continued in their minds, where they realized at some point, increasingly human beings would want to have complete conversations, not just type in words. And that's why now you can pull out your phone and have conversations with it. It seems to understand you. My battery is running. I don't have Wi-Fi here, but let me do a quick test to see if it'll work. And I'll show you. I can have a conversation and say things like, okay, Google, what is Picasso's full name?
Pablo Picasso's full name is Pablo Diego Jose Francisco de Paulo Juan Nepomuceno Maria de los Remedios Cipriano de la Santísima Trinidad Ruiz y Picasso.
Okay, Google, who was he married to?
He was married to Jacqueline Roque and Olga Koklova.
Okay, so, what I just asked this little device, in many ways is nonsensical. When I said, who was he married to? I didn't even say who I meant. But the expectation is that this thing will understand from the context that I'm still talking about Pablo Picasso. And I can ask it in my Indian accented English and still expect that this will understand it. That is to the extent to which, they let their intuition go forward and have continued to innovate. Most recently, their intuition told them, or within the organization, that the way human beings will want to interact will be not just typing in words, not just talking to it, but it could actually be through pictures and images. So when you're walking around and you see a restaurant, say in Japan, in Tokyo, you might want to hold this, and just by looking at that image of the restaurant, you will get all the information you need. Or I see someone wearing an amazing pair of shoes, and I should be able to look at that through this device and get all the information I need about the shoes. This is where the intuition is guiding them, that through pictures we will want to communicate to the world. The latest example of that intuition guiding the whole company is, as we watch all of you use these technologies, we realize that increasingly we are forcing you to do something that is a little artificial. Meaning, we force you to interact with one of the Google services, whether it's Maps or YouTube or Search, through a rectangular device. You have to be in front of your desktop or your tablet or your phone. But if you look at how human beings operate in this world, We just go about our lives, and in a normal, natural way, we want answers to come to us. We want problems to be resolved. We want our children to be happy. We want food to be laid out on the table so families can gather. So our intuition is now telling us that in future, the world expectation, my clicker does not work intuitively. Okay, there we go. One more. Yeah, so now our intuition is telling us that computing or your interaction with Google has to be ambient, meaning it has to be present all around and happen in a very natural, free-flowing kind of way. At this point, it's only an intuition. We don't know for sure if this is how human beings will want, but we have this feeling that your interaction currently with all of the services Google makes through these rectangular devices is artificially forced. So what do we mean by ambient computing? The notion is that when you are in whatever setting, if you're in a car, answers will come to you in the most appropriate way inside the car. If you are in your family kitchen making a meal for the family, then Google should show up in your life in the most natural way possible. It is this sort of an intuition that is now telling us that in future, your interaction with Google in this family situation in the living room, there might not even be a rectangular device. You might interact with a piece of furniture. That little cylinder you see in the center, this piece of furniture, this might be how you would interact with Google. What does that mean? How will that look? So think of the scenario. A family is waking up somewhere, say in Atlanta. Mom, dad, 2 kids, things are busy. It's Monday morning. Dad's coming down the stairs. Mom's packing up for a business trip. And this is how their life unfolds, possibly due to this notion of ambient computing. It's an intuition that we have at this point. There is no evidence. And this is how their life may unfold.
Okay, Google, play the morning playlist.
Okay, playing morning playlist.
Okay, Google, play music in all rooms.
Okay, Google, I'm listening.
Your flight to Portland is delayed by 30 minutes.
Change my dinner reservation tonight from 7:30 to 8.
Your reservation at Andina is now confirmed for 8 p.m.
Hey, Google, text Louise. Flight is delayed. Dinner moved to 8.
Okay, message sent.
Morning.
Morning. Hey, Google, turn the lights on in Kevin's room.
I thought you finished that already.
I forgot. Okay, Google, what's apples in Spanish?
Manzanas.
Hey, Google, has my package shipped?
Yes, it's already shipped. It'll arrive tomorrow.
Ooh, is that for me?
Maybe.
Interesting.
Okay, Google, how many stars are in our galaxy?
Well, there are about 100 to 400 billion stars, according to space.com.
Which star is the closest?
According to NASA, the nearest star system is Alpha Centauri.
Can you show me what it looks like on the TV?
Okay, Google, how's the traffic from Pebble Rock School to the airport?
Your normal route has heavy traffic. There's a faster one that'll take about 35 minutes. I've sent it to your phone.
Okay. Let's go.
Dad!
Hey, Google, what's on the calendar today?
The first event is Space Day at Kevin's school. It starts at 8 a.m.
Space Day. Are you ready, buddy?
Ready.
Okay, let's go.
Come on.
So this is an example of a product that has now come out of Intuition's Google Home. It's currently out there. Will it become as popular as this, which is also based on Intuition? The Android-powered phone has become the most deployed piece of technology. We don't know. But our intuition tells us in the future, this is how you may want to interact with us, ambient computing. So how does intuition work at Google is then the question. Now, these are a couple of examples I'm telling you about how intuition has really resulted everything from the birth of the company to products like Google Home. Well, intuition allows us to imagine solutions on a scale that normal thinking does not allow us to do. So, explaining it here, I'll give you an example. What I mean by that is intuition helps you to imagine really crazy solutions that our normal thinking might not lead us to. So let me give you an example of how that worked actually at Google. Today when you get around, I gave you the example of how do you find your way around from here to Berlin. And today we use Street View turn-by-turn navigation. So it all started with an intuition. And more than intuition, we had this evidence that even though we can put a map in front of a human being, most human beings find it hard to imagine the world based on what they're seeing on the map. This is why when we use the traditional maps, fights would break out. When the wife would tell the husband saying, Henry, we went down that street 3 times. And he's trying to hold the map. I'm not sure. The map says that this is where you should make that right turn. And you're looking for it because spatial imagination is not hard for human beings. How we navigate in real life is by looking at physical objects. Especially in India, where I come from, the way you are told directions is, go down the street and you will see Shakti Hotel, turn left, and then there will you see the Ganesh temple, and there'll be an elephant next to the temple, and behind the elephant is my house. This is how you navigate. There are no door numbers or street names. So we wanted to bring that capability to all of the world. Except how do you do that? How do you map the entire world, take images of the entire world, take video film of the entire world, street by street, and digitize it so that you can actually look at it through a device like this? This is exactly what Street View technology has done today. It's available to all of us. You can look at it on your phone right now. But when it all started in 2005, Larry Page, our founder, had this intuition. And his intuition allowed him to imagine that we could actually solve this problem. And the way the story evolved was he was flying over the US with Nikesh Arora, then the head of sales, and he tells Nikesh, he looked down the plane and he said, what if we could actually send cars down every street with cameras and record imagery and put it on Google Maps? Google Maps would become so much more useful. And Nikesh tells a story where he sat there wondering, how can we even do it? And it's a good idea in theory, but is it even possible? And Larry, his intuition works very, very differently from many of us. He said, I know exactly how to go about this. And he pulled out a napkin, and he drew a grid on it, and he said, if each grid represents 1 square kilometer on the earth below, this is how we could approach it. He solved the problem right there on a napkin. He came back to the office, talked to a team of engineers. They bought a camera, mounted it on top of a car, started driving around Mountain View. This is in 2005, to see if this intuition that he had could actually work. And in 2007 is when the first Street View imagery started showing up on Google Maps. Since then, so 2017, this year we celebrated the 10th anniversary. If you now go to Google Maps, there are images that are available from all over the world. We've driven around 10 million miles. It was considered an impossible idea at that point. It was just an intuition that sort of propelled the company forward. And we have not just stopped with main streets and highways. These are all the other kind of interesting images that is available in Street View. Just to show you some extreme examples, on the top left, that is, we've mounted these cameras on people who go up, scale these technical peaks. Or in the bottom left, what you see, this is of the Great Barrier Reef, where the same Street View concept that is born out of the intuition, where the cameras are mounted on the back of divers, and underwater photography now allows you to traverse and see the world. Or on the right, what we eventually realized that was we had to capture Street View imagery where no car would go, so we'd mount it on bicycles or on people's back, and you can go down Raman Alley and get that kind of imagery. And the one on the bottom right We started doing it indoors for museums and temples and churches. And the picture on the bottom right is from the National Museum of Iraq. So even if you're not able to travel to Iraq, you can actually go through the museum. All of this was born starting with this intuition saying this is how we should make maps useful to people. And intuition allows the company to imagine solutions to these kind of ideas on a scale that we might not have solved the problem otherwise. So that begs the question, if people are thinking of all of these ideas and intuitively, so many ideas are floating around the company, how do we know which ones we should spend time on? Because there are thousands of these ideas that people at Google are having. And this is where we have an operating mantra that Eric Schmidt, our chairman, talks about. He says, bet on your technical intuition. Bet on your technical intuition. That is a very modern kind of concept, technical intuition. What he means by this is, he says every organization has its own unique information, its own unique culture. It has a certain understanding of the world, and based on that, it knows in its gut, that organization, the solutions to certain problems because of what it is that you do. So an example of that, if I were to pick a local example, so a organization like the German auto, the rail company, they have a certain understanding of surface transportation, and using that, they have some intuition about transporting people over the surface using trains and mass transit systems. And they can bet on the technical intuition and solve problems for urban transportation. And this is what Eric says, bet on your technical intuition. And it is betting on a technical intuition, as an example, that allowed us to why is it going back? Okay. It is betting on a technical intuition that allowed Google to come up with the self-driving car. Because Google has no history in the auto industry. It has no business to be in the auto industry. So why did we even get into the car business, meaning self-driving cars? But we had a certain technical intuition that we could solve a problem. So let me go behind the scenes and explain how this evolved. There was a certain piece of data that Google engineers were looking at that they wanted to solve. And the piece of data they were looking at was the fact that every year 1.8 million people die due to auto accidents around the world. That is the equivalent of the entire population of the city of San Francisco and neighboring Marin County every single year. Most of them are caused by what? What would you guess? Those accidents? Human error. It's humans that create those accidents, and that's why 1.8 million people die. People fall asleep on the wheel. People get distracted when they're text messaging and driving. So the solution that they wanted to come up with, maybe we should get humans out of the picture and make our roads safer. But that is a preposterous idea. How can you have cars driving around without human beings behind the wheel? But this is where that team that is working on it, through the technical intuition, said, no, we have the capability to make that happen. Because what does a car need to go from place A to place B? It needs two things. It needs to know, turn by turn, how to navigate its way around the street. And said, we already have that information. We are giving it to human beings. They are using their phones to find the way around. We could make the car do the same thing. The second thing that the car needs to be safe on the street is to be able to see around its immediate vicinity and make a decision. And because of this technical intuition, these engineers argued that that information is sort of available to us when these street view cars are going down. They are seeing what is happening around them. So if we can somehow allow the car to make a decision based on that information it is seeing through its seeing eye, we can make that car drive safely. So they followed through on that intuition and ended up building this concept car that can drive itself. And as an extreme form of that experiment, a couple years ago, we put Steve Mahan inside one of these cars in the city of Austin and asked him to drive around. Steve Mahan is blind. He's the president of the Santa Clara Blind Association. So not only is he blind, he's never been to Austin. I want to show you a video of how his experience in Austin unfolds, sitting inside one of these cars that can take him around just based on voice commands.
We spend so much of our lives driving from place to place.
I'm just going to stop.
Just right here?
Yes. Save us a seat.
Shouldn't it be easier and safer to get where we want to go? Since 2009, our team at Google has been developing fully self-driving technology and testing it on real city streets every single day. Until, after more than 1 million miles, we were ready to take a big step forward. In 2015, we completed the world's first truly driverless ride on public roads. Just a person in a car, no steering wheel, no pedals, navigating everyday traffic.
Well, I've never been in Austin, Texas. Now I'm driving in Austin, Texas. It's a profound experience for me to be alone in a car. A very important segment of my life was cut away when my vision failed, and a self-driving car would give me a huge part of my life back.
This is just the beginning. We're looking ahead to a new way.
So this is an example of betting technical intuition, solving problems on this scale, and this is one of the things I would urge you, that no matter which group that you work with, what organization, you all have access to a certain technical intuition that you should trust and rely on. But intuition does not automatically happen at Google. What we have noticed is over time that there are certain preconditions that allow intuition to thrive. So let me explain to you what those conditions are. The first is, for intuition to work well, it needs, next one. Yeah, I got that. So for intuition to work well, it needs a certain amount of freedom. And what do we mean by that? Intuition thrives best when your mind is allowed to wander and there's a certain amount of spaciousness. And this is why there is a strong relationship between meditation, mindfulness, and intuition. This is one of the reasons why in a university or research environments you find a lot of innovation coming. Because if you're a researcher in a university, you have the freedom to let your mind wander on the forefronts of knowledge, whether it's computer science or economics or mathematics. But in a corporate environment, that gets stifled. You're put on a project and you're told, just swim in your lane. Don't lift your head and look at anything else. We wanted to avoid that. So when Google was founded, because its origins was in the PhD program at Stanford University, the founders wanted to create that same kind of environment that was available in a university setting and bring it to a corporate setting. And the way they did that was introducing a concept called 20% time. The idea of 20% time was anybody at Google could take 20% of the time, that is 1 day a week, 8 hours a week, and work on whatever they wanted to work. That freedom would then allow them to work on great concepts, technologies that the intuition told them to go work on, because deep down they're feeling the urge. And when you give that kind of freedom, when you allow intuition to thrive in that freedom, amazing things happen. So let me tell you a story about that. 2 engineers working in our Paris office, Damien Koss and David Henry, were trying in their 20% time to solve a very unique problem. They were working on the Google Cultural Institute. The Google Cultural Institute takes the greatest works of art and culture that is available in the world, around 750 museums and art galleries, digitizes it so that the whole world can enjoy them. So you might be a high schooler in Kathmandu, Nepal, with no opportunity to travel to Amsterdam, and still you can visit the Rembrandt Museum and see all of the art. This is what the Google Cultural Institute does. But the experience we bring to human beings is a two-dimensional experience on a screen. So David and Damien said, what if we were able to give you an immersive experience where you felt like you were actually inside the museum? So if you were looking at a Rodin sculpture, you felt like you were able to walk all around the sculpture and see it from all angles. So they're trying to answer this question in that 20% time because they had the freedom to let their minds wander, and their intuition said that this would be more useful to humanity. So the solution to that was virtual reality, except there was a problem. All the virtual reality headgear that they looked at that time cost $20,000 or more. So it would never be available for all of the world's population. And we always try to build solutions that everybody can use and make it free. We want to give as much as possible our services free. So while they were doing this in the 20% time, they realized that most of the capabilities that existed in this very expensive virtual reality gear actually were already present in these phones. So I said, maybe we could build something cheap using the phones that are already available in people's hands. And it is that intuitive thinking in that freedom in the 20% time that allowed them to come up with this solution. One more click. I'm putting it on a black screen. Oh, maybe, okay. This is where I think I know what I'm doing now. It took me a lot of intuition to figure out what is going wrong here. They came up with a solution called Google Cardboard. It's literally made out of cardboard and two plastic lenses. You open it and you insert your phone and it becomes a virtual reality headset. So when it was first announced 2 years ago at Google I/O by our CEO Sundar Pichai, you see the smirk on his face? Because the audience laughed back. They said, this is Google talking about a futuristic technology called virtual reality and you're holding up a piece of cardboard. But we were serious. And again, it came out of the intuition that the freedom, the 20% freedom allowed David and Damien. Because nobody told them to work on it. They decided on their own. It was not a formal project from the company. So they took these pieces of cardboard and distributed it free at our developer conference. And when you do it, we don't quite know what human beings will do, but everybody's intuition takes it in different directions. And one particular individual in Miami did something with it that was incredible. So to move into that part of the story, I want to introduce to you this little baby. Her name is Baby Tegan. Baby Tegan Lexkin was born in Miami 2 years ago, and when she was born, she had a serious problem. She had only one lung, and her heart was in the wrong place. So the doctors at the hospital sent her home literally to die because there was nothing that they could do. Her situation was too fragile. But she had an aunt who refused to give up, who said, there must be some way by which my niece's life can be saved. So she started calling all of the innovative pediatric cardiologists around the country, and most of them said they won't be able to help. But one of them, Dr. Raymond Burke of the Miami General Hospital, said, possibly we might be able to do something, but it's still a very, very difficult and fragile situation. But the way we make it work is we usually take a 3D image of the baby's heart, and then the surgical team collaborates and decides how to conduct the procedure. But there's a problem. The 3D printer in that hospital was broken, and ordering a new one and then printing the 3D image of the baby's heart, all of this would take several days, and there wasn't enough time for baby Tegan. This is when a junior doctor in this on the surgical team, Dr. Raymond Burke, said, wait, I may have a solution. He happened to have received one of those Google Cardboards through which you can do free with low-cost virtual reality. He just happened to have one, and he was playing around with it. And the surgery team The cardiologist said, let's give that a try. Here's how the story then unfolds for baby Tegan from that point on.
I see it in 3D. I can see it from the front, the back, I can see it from the top, and I can see it from the bottom. One of these is a 2D image, but when I close it and I look through the lenses, then I get 3D, and I can move it just by turning my head. And you know, for a surgeon, that's everything. He knows exactly what he's going to get when he opens up that baby's chest.
That is so cool. You move and it moves the heart. It's almost like you're in her heart.
It's revolutionary because the way that we would plan surgery in the past is we took a two-dimensional image, and then in our mind we would have to process that and try to come up with an idea of what we were going to see when the baby's chest was open.
So your team sat in a room and all of you guys were doing this?
A bunch of us, yeah. Minutes and millimeters make the difference between getting it right and getting it wrong. Once we saw these images, we said, wait a second, we can figure this out. I think this is the difference between her living and dying.
So on December 15, 2000, thank you. December 15, 2016, they, using this piece of cardboard, they conducted surgery on baby Tegan. She survived. She's alive now, and this is a picture with her twin, who did not have the same problem. So this is an example all coming out because that 20% time, that freedom allowed intuition to thrive among these two engineers far away from the main headquarters. We also know that intuition loves experimentation. And what I mean by this is our own experience shows that while we might have a certain intuition, there is no guarantee that we've understood it correctly or that it will succeed. So often we have to keep trying different things for intuition to really. Intuition is not a perfect process. We have a certain idea, a faint sound is what we hear, a faint idea, and we follow it through. And sometimes we get great results, sometimes not. But we have to give the space within the company for experimentation based on intuition, knowing that we might fail a lot. In fact, there is a graveyard of failed products at Google that somebody has built that you can see, a virtual graveyard, to celebrate that intuition is not a perfect process. And this is the dirty little secret of Google, that over the years, we built hundreds of products. Most of them you don't even know. You read the list, you don't even recognize, because we have a certain intuition. We start working on a project, building a product, and most of them actually do not end up what our intuition initially told us that we were trying to build. But it morphs into something else. Many of them we abandon, we move on to other things. We learn from that. All of them started out of an intuition. But among these, 8 have gone on to become mega successes out of the hundreds. And that is the dirty little secret by which intuition works at Google. It is not a perfect process. A lot of experimentation is needed. So among these, 8 have gotten to a stage where they're used by 1 billion human beings every single month. And those 8 are, so if you start thinking of the most successful products, search obviously is one of them. The other 7 being, as you think through the list, you might have, I want you to think what those 7 are. It's YouTube, Gmail, Maps, Android, Chrome, Google Play Store, and Google Cloud. So this experimentation based on the different intuition is what led us to those 8 very successful products. But along the way, be not afraid to let a lot of these products die or morph. The third condition for intuition at Google, we found out by conducting study on a lot of teams, and that is the fact that for intuition to really work well, for intuition to blossom, you need a condition called psychological safety. So how we arrived at this conclusion was, we started looking at, there are so many products that are getting built. Some teams are more successful, some are less. We started studying these teams. What makes some groups at Google so much more successful than others? And we had some theory as to there might be certain factors. Initially, we thought maybe they all have the same level of education. Another theory was maybe they're all of a similar type, that they have a common language or they're from a common cultural background. Lots of psychological theories. We had about 400 different variables that we looked at. And we started studying because we love data, we love gathering information about everything at Google. So we started looking at these teams, or it took a number of years for us to analyze this. And we could not find a correlation between most of these factors and what was a predictor of success among these teams. And after a couple years, finally we stumbled across 5 factors. The most important among them was this condition we found called psychological safety. Now, psychological safety is not a concept that we came up at Google. It's a Harvard psychologist who defined the term. We just found out that teams with a high psychological safety were outperforming teams that did not exhibit psychological safety. Psychological safety is a condition where you can come into work, you can be completely yourself. You can speak your mind. If you have an intuition, you can express it. Nobody will ridicule you. You can follow through on the intuition. And if you fail, you will still be accepted in the team. There is no stigma attached to that failure. So when you create conditions for psychological safety, you now have the freedom to express to the team that I have an intuition that this is the direction in which we should go, knowing that the intuition may or may not guide you in the right direction, and it's okay if things didn't work out. In fact, what we found among sales team is that teams with high psychological safety outperform the targets by 17%. And teams without psychological safety actually underperform the targets. This is a publicly available study. It's called Project Aristotle. So if you search for Project Aristotle on the web, you'll find that entire study. Moving on and then closing out, a couple of last points I want. We're still in a very business-oriented company. So while intuition may have gotten us all these places, we still have to think like any corporate entity. So the way we make it work practically is that we might start with intuition and then we corroborate that with data. And when you put together intuition and data, that's when we arrive at the moment of truth. So for example, our intuition, did I block it out? Our intuition is what led us to build wearable computing, because we thought this would be extremely useful. But the data told us something different, that all of you as users didn't quite like the product. You thought it was too intrusive, you thought it was annoying, you thought it violated privacy. A lot of feedback came back. So this is when we said, even though we had the intuition this could be useful, when we looked at the actual data, the truth was this was not the product that human beings needed. So we're going back and reworking it. So it is in that sense we also take it to a very practical, thoughtful kind of company by combining intuition and data. So all of this leads to the question, and I'm going to just take one more minute, Alfred, if you don't mind, is how do you develop this intuition? How do you sharpen it? And I don't have any magic formula. There are many, many different ways, and this conference is actually about exploring. My own personal way of arriving at a very strong intuition is through the path of yoga and meditation. I've been doing it for 25 years. Since I was a little kid, I was trained in it. And I find that when I drop into my practice, whether it's meditation or yoga, I did both this morning, it allows my heart and mind to open up to solutions, to ideas that simply did not exist, that I could not have seen in other modes of operation when I might be more frantic. So these are my personal pathways to find my own sense of intuition. So my closing advice to this whole conference, if you were to ask me, how do we develop intuition among this group? How do we develop intuition among the larger world population? My simple answer is a 3-step formula, and that is we have to create space in our life by whatever wisdom tradition that works for you. And thankfully, there are so many wisdom traditions out in the world human beings have developed. But create the space to find a little bit of stillness in the body, silence in the mind, and spaciousness in the heart. And that will then open up your neural pathways to intuition. Thank you. Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gopi.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving us an insight of how intuition works into Google. My question was always, when I was working for Google as well, how can intuition become, because intuition, as you said, needs freedom. So how can you develop intuition over a certain framework when it is bounded into an economic and financial system which requires a certain kind of demands?
Yeah. So in regular companies, this is why intuition is not allowed to thrive, it gets killed. And the way we've addressed that problem in a place like Google is, the 20% time framework allows people to come up with ideas. When you come up with these ideas, when you present it, you're never asked the question. Larry and Sergey, the founders, and traditionally we had to go and present their ideas to them. They would never ask, how much money is this going to make? What is the business plan? What is the net present value? Have you done the economic analysis? They didn't care. The only question they cared about is this going to solve a big problem for hundreds of millions of human beings? And if it did not, they said, you're not thinking big enough. Go back and reframe the issue that you're working on. And their theory was, if you solve a big problem, be extremely useful, somehow the rest of it will take care of itself. This is a very unconventional way of looking, but that's the cultural makeup of Google.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Gopi.
Thank you.
I was reminded by Uncle's speech today in the morning when he said he has to listen to his grandma. And his connection and his intuition came with the experience of the dialogue between him and his grandma, and the dialogue between his grandma, him, and the nature. And out of this conclusion, something came up which had an effect in a different way on millions of people, because Uncle has told us that he has traveled in 69 countries in the world. And what Nippon always speaks about is a ripple effect. And I think, Uncle, thank you very much for sending all the ripples to all these countries, to all these people, because I believe that intuition in yourself can help to make the world a better place, and then technology can race on that and can be built on that. Thank you for doing this. And that is a good introduction to bring us to our next speaker.